I believe firmly in Parkinson's law. Work is going to expand to the time allotted. So if you're paying people by the hour, you're just paying them to be slow. Pay people by the output. And again, in an AI world, they're going to find a way to maximize their output.
Hey everyone, welcome to Time to Thrive. Today's guest doesn't just hire well, he's the sniper of hiring. Kasim Aslam is the kind of entrepreneur who can spot top 1% talent from across the globe without breaking a sweat. He's built multiple 7 and 8 figure companies, sold two of them, and still manages to be the guy you'd want at your backyard barbecue and your board meeting. He's a hiring expert, a best-selling author, and probably the only guy who can make talking about applicant vetting sound like a Netflix special. Please welcome the man who proves that finding A players isn't a talent, it's a system. Welcome to the show, Kasam.
Thanks for having me, Bethany. I appreciate you.
Okay, like always, read a super random question, number between 1 and 5.
Two, because I have two little boys.
Ooh. Oh, what is the one thing you wish you spent more time doing when you were younger?
Oh, man. I wish I had spent more time outside.
Mm, I can't say
But
that because I was outside. If the sun was up, I was out there. So
no, I don't know how to do any of the good stuff like hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, ATV and dirt bike, like none of it.
it's never too late. It's
Yeah.
never too late.
So that's the plan. I want to get a homestead. I'm shopping for land somewhere on the east.
Oh,
And
that's exciting.
yeah, I want the second half of my life to just be outside. Like you said, if the sun's up, we're out. Sometimes if the sun's down, we'll be out. Who knows?
Yeah, homesteading is very, in right now. We have backyard chickens ourselves,
Nice.
so we have eggs galore.
Yeah. Do you eat the chickens though?
No, we just have layers.
Yeah. I feel like I'd get too attached.
I haven't named them. I think if you name
That's the
them,
rule.
yeah, once
Yeah.
you name them because, we lose them to hawks and,
Mm.
other predators we have in the neighbor dog got a few. So
Oh no.
if you get attached, if they're named, then that becomes just more traumatic.
It's a good note. Don't name the chickens.
Don't name the chickens. Not that I could they all look alike to me, so I
Mm.
don't know how I would tell them apart anyway. They need little name tags or something. Listen, I'm excited about having you on the show because I will tell you, I've been a business owner, in my current business 17 years. I had a business prior to that for 5 years. Hiring is the one thing I have the hardest time with. I'm a total empath. So I feel like people's stories and I want to help people. And so I find hiring really, really tough because I believe what people tell me.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
they
so
don't
should
always
we,
tell me
right?
the right things. And
Yeah.
so I'm excited to have you here so you can teach me and our audience of business owners the art of hiring. And you've hired hundreds of people from around the world. What's your go-to strategy? Let's just start at a high level there with a go-to strategy for hiring top 1% talent.
I've developed an entire framework. I call it my life's work, which feels dramatic, and I know it's not because I spent 20 years effectively stealing everybody else's tips, tricks, hacks, best practices. And I think to answer your question directly, if you don't mind, I'd like to just zoom out and say that the way we're taught to hire, just in terms of like the core ethos, is wrong. It's flawed. We are taught to hire as though people are commodities. And if you pull any business book off the shelf, even the ones by the greats, Covey and Maxwell, and it doesn't matter, Dalio, they refer to people in terms of commoditization. So what that means is like, oh, you need a graphic designer, just hire a graphic designer, right? Like the commodity that is a graphic designer. But the thing about a commodity is it's easily interchangeable. So if you have an ear of corn and I have an ear of corn and you and I swap, or you've got a chicken and I've got a chicken and you and I swap, we're no better or worse off than we were moments before. And that's not true with people. People are not interchangeable. As a matter of fact, I think, and this will get a little, we'll just see where we go with it, Bethany, and you can tell me how repellent my narrative is. I think people are miracles. I think every human being is a literal miracle, and I say literal because if you look up the definition of the term miracle, it's an inexplicable event, and I think humans are inexplicable. We're impossible to explain. Even if you're an atheist, if you don't wanna I think actually atheists would be more impressed by the fact that there's this ultra smart, heavily evolved super ape on a floating rock solving problems and building things, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah, I love
amazing.
it. I love it.
And so then you take the sum total of the miracle that is this human being, and then you condense them into this little commoditized
Box.
block, and you're like, "Oh, you sit there and you follow these instructions and you do these things, you're on the assembly line and you do as you're told." All of the emphasis in hiring is placed on the systems, and then we assume that the person is actually almost superfluous to the process. And I think the opposite is true, and AI is teaching us so. Because at this point in time, interestingly, a robot can do all of those things better than a human can. A robot can sit here and follow the instructions better than a human can, and we're actually seeing that, right? We're watching ChatGPT and these AI mechanisms eat jobs wholesale. So the way to think about hiring is, what can AI not do? Everybody's so obsessed with what AI can do. What can
Right.
robots do? What can mechanics it's not it's the opposite. What can it not do? What doesn't scale? And when you approach your business from that perspective, a couple of things happen. The first one is you put yourself in a position of providing value that can exceed, or not can, that will exceed the commoditized endeavor, which is what you want. Because as small business owners, we can't we can't win that war. Like, Amazon can, right? Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, they win the commoditization war because they have the biggest machines and the biggest mechanisms, and by literal definition, that's where the profitability and efficiency flows. There's no profitability and efficiency for you and I. The profitability for us is gonna be in value drivers, and value drivers, I think businesses have 4 things to sell, and that's it. They have products, programs, processes, and people. Products, programs, and processes are all commoditized, commoditizable, or strictly speaking, commodities. People are the only unique differentiator left, and they're extraordinarily important. And so instead of shopping for a commodity, shop for a miracle. And the way you look for those things is it's entirely different. They're actually diametrically opposed. They're the exact opposite method of shopping. And so the way we've been taught to hire is wholesale wrong. I'll pause there. How did I do?
Well, that was great. So let's go to the opposite of that. How, you're talking about, searching for the miracle, the person that's not a commodity that is going to add value to your business.
Mhm.
And you can even get down to the nitty-gritty of that to say, well, I'm paying them X amount an hour and they're generating, 2 or 3 times that. What's the on the opposite side of that, how do you weed out the imposters? Because I think that's my problem.
Yeah. Well, so that's such a good question. I wanna dig into what you just said because it's a brilliant observation, and that's actually the exact right way to think about this, to think about these miracles, is if I'm paying you X, I wanna get Y. Right? Input to output. So what I refer to this type of person, this type of talent is Pareto talent. It's the name of our business. Our business is called Pareto Talent. And we're naming it off of the mathematical principle that most people call the 80-20 rule. It was developed by an Italian mathematician whose name was Pareto. And what he observed is in every organic ecosystem, 20% of your input yields 80% of your output. And what's crazy is it's probably the most important lesson to learn, not just in business, but in life, because it's crazy at every level of analysis. So 20% of chickens yield 80% of the eggs, and 20% of the cows give you 80% of the milk. 20% of the criminals commit 80% of the crimes. 20% of your customers are responsible for 80% of your revenue, and 20% of your employees do 80% of the work. And that last one should sting a little, right? Because you're like,
Yeah.
gosh, 20% of the people that you hire are going to do 80%. And it's fractal, and I didn't know what the word fractal meant. Somebody had to explain it to me. It means that if you zoom in, it continues to be true. So to put that in round numbers, if you have an organization with 1,000 employees, 200 employees do 80% of that work. And you're like, all right, that's a bummer, but it is what it is, and it makes sense because I've been in, I've seen large organizations, and I've seen that personally. I think we all have. But zoom in on those 200 people. This is where things get crazy. If you zoom in on the 200, 40 of those 200 are doing 80% of that work, and zoom in on the 40. 8 do 80% of that work and zoom in on the 8. What ends up happening is you find out that in a 1,000 person organization, one person is doing about 25% of the work, which is mind blowing. And it's also been true both from a data driven perspective and anecdotally. I built the number one ranked Google Ads agency in the world. I sold it for 8 figures to a SoftBank backed MarTech company in 2022. Here's what's crazy: I had 80 employees. One person was managing 40% of my revenue when we sold. His name was John Moran. He's the greatest Google Ads mind in the world. And I have a portfolio of 15 businesses. I've built 6 multi-million-dollar businesses, and I can tell you this is the rule. It's not the exception. And what most people do is they look at the fact that there's massively over-engineered output from a certain number of their people, and they freak out because they see existential crisis on a spreadsheet. So what do? They mitigate the risk, which forces companies to build things like minimums and quotas. But what you're doing there, you're not pulling the Pareto principle. You're not pulling everybody else up. You're actually holding other people down. They flatten the hierarchy. A hierarchy is shaped like a
Yeah.
pyramid. Functional hierarchies are shaped like pyramids. They actually, it's shocking. It's insanity. They get rid of their highest performing assets by quote unquote mitigating the risk, which is just absolute insanity. So you want to look at Pareto talent in exactly the way that you termed. It's input output. And the input output should be extraordinarily weighted in your favor. This is where things get really interesting because when you hire Pareto talent, you don't get 10 or 20 or 30% more. You get 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, 100 times. What that means is if you think about a teeter-totter, you just weighted the teeter-totter in your favor to a degree that makes it impossible for you to pay too much. And this is the point that I'm marshaling at. If you really, really, really want Pareto talent, you have to pay more. And
Mm.
not just pay more in money, you have to pay more in things like flexibility, time, meaningful work, etc. I like to let people work from home on a semi-flexible schedule doing meaningful work, and I pay them more than they'd ever make domestically. And I have a data point for you too. You have to pay 10% more than the high water mark. And most people I say that to are like, oh, Kasim, I could never. You don't understand my business. You don't understand the economics. You don't understand my margins. And to which I respond, no, you don't understand math. Because when you pay 10% more than the high watermark, you get 10 times the output or 50 times the output. That's the Pareto distribution. Winners want to win. You have to pay Pareto talent more. And business owners fight this. I did myself because we're trying to hire people like commodities. But when you pay people more and you actually end up capturing top talent and you realize how much more they contribute, it changes your entire paradigm about work and life. But you end up in the problem that you just mentioned, which is how do you tell the difference? How do you weed through them? Because when they put a job posting up paying 10% more than the high watermark, you will get inundated with applications. And everybody looks great.
Right.
Everybody's resume is great. Everybody interviews great because we've made interviewing a practice unto itself. They all say the right things. So what I do, and this is the framework that I put in my book, and it's all free, by the way. Your listeners can have it, including templates and checklists and downloads and one sheets. There's no ascension. There's no sales pitch on the back end. I don't have a course or a mastermind I'm selling. I want my name to be synonymous with the word hiring. So they can have all of this. The sneak peek is this. I build in what I call fly traps. So my just to give you a couple examples, the job posting at the very top, so if I say, hey, I'm hiring for this particular role, I'm paying 10% more than the high water mark, so people are automatically attracted to it. But at the very top of the job posting, I say, to apply, your application has to read, I actually read the instructions in the subject line. And so when they send their email with the application, if the subject line doesn't read, I actually read the instructions, it automatically gets filtered out. My EA never even sees it. And then there's
Wow.
there's a host of instructions in the job posting. For instance, I'll say something really, really, really simple and benign. I'll say, please send me a link to your resume in a PDF format with this naming convention. Maybe it's last name dot, first name dot, role or whatever. Do I care? No. Do I care it's a link and not an attachment? No. Do I care it's PDF and not Word? No. I want to make sure you can follow simple instructions. When
Right.
they send me now, here's what's really interesting. If it takes 1,000 applicants to produce one executive assistant at Pro Talent. So there's a crazy taper to the funnel. If you have thousands of applicants, half of them won't follow the basic instructions. The other half will follow the basic instructions, but then their formatting is abysmal or their answers are just obviously phoned in or very clearly chat GPT'd. So you instantly have this filtering mechanism. Now, from this point, most people jump into interviews, which I think is a flawed model. Interviews and resumes tell you nothing until you've worked with somebody. So here's what I do. This is another fly trap. I will send you, let's say you applied for a job with me. I'd say, hey, Bethany, thank you so much for following the instructions. I reviewed your submission. It looks great. However, I've hired hundreds of people in my life, and I know that I know nothing until we've worked together. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to pay you in advance for a trial project. I'll pay you X for 2 to 4 hours of your time, and X is whatever is a reasonable rate for that geography. So if I'm in the Philippines, 20 bucks could be phenomenal, right? If you're in Eastern
Right.
Europe, maybe it's a little bit more, and you're Latin America, split the difference. So let's say I'm in Colombia. I'll pay you 40 bucks for 2 hours of your time. I just want to see how we work together. Is that fair? If you agree, send me your PayPal address. Here's the funny part. I send them the 40 bucks. I don't send them the trial project. And I wait to see who follows up with me. And then I have people say, "Well, Custom, that's so expensive." Is it though? Because if I send $40 to 10 people, there's 420 people, there's $800. I just spent $800 to see who's going to con me out of $40, who's actually integrous, who follows up, who's accountable. I've had people email me 2 weeks later saying, "Hey, you sent me 40 bucks and you never sent me the trial project." And in my mind, I'm like, "Yeah, and I'm glad I didn't hire you." They're on their absolute best behavior during this process. What do you think happens when you give them a job? So
Right.
then the few people that follow up, it ends up being about half. You send them the trial project, and the trial project's no joke, and it's related to the role that you're hiring for. It has to be. That's critical. But then there's more fly traps. I'll do things like, I'll ask, "When do you think this will be done by based on the scope of work?" Let's say it's Monday and you tell me it's gonna be done Friday. I never give deadlines. I wanna know they can manage expectations, they can manage timelines. So it's Monday, you tell me, "Custom, it's gonna be done Friday." I say, "Great. In order to do the job, you actually need to download these assets. Here's a login to Box or Drive or whatever." I send them the wrong username and password. And then I wait to see how long it takes for them to follow up. Because if it's Thursday night and you told me it would be done on Friday and I get a frantic email from you saying the password doesn't work, now I know you're the type of person that doesn't check and make sure they have the resources up. So there's hundreds of fly traps that you can build out. I think fly traps should be specific to the role. I talk about this a lot in my book. It's my favorite part. But the end result is you put people in the top. It's a funnel. You put people in the top of the funnel. And because you're giving so much more than all other employers are willing to give, you'll get inundated with applications, but you put in natural filtration mechanisms that keep you from having to do really any work. When you're done, when people come out the bottom of the funnel, because they've done a trial project, you actually get to see, like, oh, wow, you're capable of the work, you're capable of the work, you're capable of the work. And now you just hire the person who's the best culture fit. And what's really, really, really interesting, when I used to do interviews, I would do interviews first and then the trial project. And I wouldn't give the trial project to anybody that didn't pass the interview process. And I started to realize the interview really feels so divorced from the trial project. I started to give everybody the trial project. And I found that I always guessed wrong. Who I thought
Ooh,
was going to be the best in the interview was never, ever, 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 never, ever, ever the best at the trial project. As a matter of fact, interestingly, most people interview poorly when they're really adept technicians, because 'cause they're 2 entirely different skills. You're not hiring somebody to
right.
be a professional interviewer. So, when somebody's done a trial project, you really know who your Pareto talent is. And the last thing I'll say is when you're hiring Pareto talent, the thing that you can still do even after you've found them is you can break them, you can ruin them. And the way you do that is by micromanaging. People who think they're delegating very often aren't delegating at all, they're micromanaging, and you know the difference because if you delegate a task, you're a micromanager. If you delegate a project, you're actually delegating. So when you hire Pareto talent, authorship creates ownership. These are people that need to be let go. They need to be released into the workforce to do their job, and it's very, very, very important that we allow them to do that. And they will run farther and faster and more effectively than anybody that you ever hired in your entire life. I think this is the greatest system for hiring that's ever been developed, and I don't mind saying that because it's not really mine. I just stole everybody else's ideas and put it all together, but this framework has yielded some of the most extraordinary employees I've ever had from all over the globe, and that's the last note that I'll offer is look internationally, because the whole rest of the world has extraordinary people, and they're actually looking to Western companies as aspirational opportunities, where when you hire here, dude, God bless this country. I love it here. I'm so glad that I was born and raised here. And people don't here need to work. You know what I mean? Like they just don't have to work. They like to sometimes, but it's an option. And if you go places where work is not optional and then you give people a really amazing work environment, you experience something that American employers have never experienced, which is gratitude. Like you can change lives. It has anthropological significance. So that's my sales pitch.
Wow. I loved all of that, and I coulda used it 20 years ago, that's for sure. I think another question that I struggle with sometimes is knowing when to hire.
Mm,
My team, I'm very fortunate. My team's been, everybody has been with me a long time. I think our least amount of time with the company is like 8 years.
wow, good for you. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
so but the one position that will come and go kinda is more at the entry level
Yep.
stage, just because we're small and there's nowhere for people to go, if they're at that level. So I tend to hire more experienced people and then they stay. But, w you know, round the question, talk about that question of when to hire, 'cause a lot of times you need to hire, or at least in my mind, you need to hire before you need to hire.
Oh, absolutely. I think so there's 2 answers really. It depends on the organization. So in my mind, there's 2 types of healthy organizations. Organizations that are on a growth path, and then organizations that are sustaining. And the latter type, excuse me, the latter type tends to be a lifestyle business. So if you're looking to sustain, hiring is based off of your existing talent pool, because all you're doing is if one leaves, one comes, and the agreement that you need with your employees is you can leave anytime you want to, and I'll help, but please help me find and train your replacement. And so the second type of entity is way easier to figure out because you're sustaining what's already there, and you just need to make sure that what's already there is intact. When you're on a growth path, what I'd strongly recommend is never allow yourself to get over 70 to 80% capacity. So if you have and just to make this an easier napkin model, I ran a Google Ads agency, so I'll use that as an example. Let's say that one Google Ads specialist can manage 10 clients, to use round numbers. The minute that Google Ads specialist is on client number 7, that means I only have 3 clients left before I need to have another specialist, and not another specialist hired, another specialist
Train.
hired, trained, vetted, that I trust and so 70% capacity is actually dangerous, right? Like that's you're on the line. I like to hire much sooner. And if I'm on a growth path, I never like hiring one person at a time. So this will eat into your margins, but it maximizes the efficacy of your hiring to a degree that I think is really, really, really worth it. Always hire at least in pairs. And the reason you want to hire in pairs is because one, when people train together, it sticks. You create more a semblance of community. Nobody's the new guy or the new gal, right? Like they actually have somebody else there that they're pinging off of. It makes training more effective. It makes integration into the team more effective. And especially when you hire Pareto talent, people run faster. You put a racehorse out on the track by itself, like, that's going for a walk in the park, that's a trot. You put a racehorse out on the track next to another racehorse, and just naturally,
Mhm.
right, just, whatever, the instincts kick in, and they're gonna go as fast as they can go, and I've noticed that the performance of my team increases by multiples when people are put in groups because there's this really healthy sense of and it's not just competition, it's uplifting. Like I can only ever know, let's say a new hire can know, just again using my numbers, 80%, right? A new hire is only ever going to know 80%, but they're always going to have a 20% knowledge gap. Well, if you have two new hires, in a perfect world, what I know and what you know aren't concentric circles. There's an overlap. And so if I know 80% and you know 80%, those are different 80%. And so maybe I'm covering 10% of your knowledge gap and you're covering 10% of mine. And now you've weaponized your new hires in a way that other entities can't do. So hiring in pairs is harder because now you have excess fulfillment. But with the other thing that's really interesting, and it's been my experience in the entities that I've built, you grow into it's like a what is it? I think it's snakes that won't grow bigger than their tank. You know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah.
grow into the size that the organization is
Well,
equipped to
humans
grow.
do this, right? We buy a bigger house and then suddenly all the closets are packed full and the basement
Yep,
is crowded. I mean, we do that.
exactly the same thing. So when you
Yeah.
have an organization that can fit growth, you naturally grow into it. You have to be careful with that thesis. You don't wanna hire 50 people tomorrow and then find out that you can't feed them all. But I think that there's a healthy way to stay ahead of the curve, and that's the way that I'd recommend. Always hire before you're at 70% capacity and then hire in pairs.
So for a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs, the first hire they make is an assistant.
Yep,
It was mine. I
that's my
mean, years
recommendation.
ago, right? And she started part-time, and then as I grew, she got more hours, and then when she was maxed out, we hired somebody else, and on it went, right? Um, when you're hiring that person, it is pretty key because you're trying to take things off your desk so you can focus on generating revenue.
Right.
What are some red flags when you're hiring that key first employee assistant type role? What are some red flags to watch out for?
So assuming you've used the framework I've shared, I think the red flags are well attended to in the process. What I really think people should pay more attention to as far as red flags is themselves. My experience has been, especially now that I own a staffing agency, I have 80 placed executive assistants, 80. And we've had, I don't know, call it 15 blow ups. And with one exception, it's never the assistant, ever. It's always the entrepreneur. And entrepreneurs are broken people. You and I are not normal. Like Douglas Brackman has this great book called Driven, and he talks about the epigenetic difference between entrepreneurs and quote unquote normal people, and how we actually experience the chemical cocktail for happiness and love, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine, two up, one down. Most people experience that when they accomplish a goal. Entrepreneurs experience it in pursuit of the goal. He calls it the difference between the farmer brain and the hunter brain. And only 10% of people have the hunter brain. And they're actually not healthy to be around because they can't stop that. You know what I mean? They just can't
Yeah,
slow down. And
I
entrepreneur,
yeah.
yeah, you're like, yeah, I know. Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but like anything as a human, you have issues that you have to be self-aware and
Right.
then like take steps to address. And as an entrepreneur, you have to know those things about yourself too. And we work with business owners. And so to some extent I'm trying to manage that chaos. I had a client one time, first meeting I went to, and he kept talking, and the more he was talking, the more stuff was coming out of nowhere, right? And it was like, "Oh, yeah, we do this, and, oh, this is over here, and, oh," typical entrepreneur brain
Yep.
happening, and he was just verbally throwing that all up at me, and I just handed him a thing of Post-it notes, and I see, "Please write down everything on each idea on one Post-it," and he went through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I came back and then I like, I've been sorting them into categories and trying to, figure it out. And, so yeah, that's the entrepreneur brain. It's just all these ideas all the time. And that's part of what we do is try and get people into a lane and not
Yeah.
chasing rabbits and being okay with parking things for a time so that they can focus and actually accomplish. Because a lot of times if you're unfettered in that, you don't really finish anything.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I like the way that you said that too. Getting into a lane. I think that you know, return to the red flag query, you're the red flag. That's why
Mm,
you need an assistant. You're, batshit
right.
insane, plates spinning, ball juggling, all the different. So, and then here comes this person that if you follow the right process is actually a highly functional human. And what we tend to do is we tend to try to get them to do everything we're doing a
Like we
little
do.
bit. So it's like I'm spinning 50 plates and I'm juggling 50 balls and I have 50 conduits of communication and I'm gonna give you 10% of everything. And that's my idea of how I'm gonna manage a assistant. Oh, if they can just take 10% off my plate, so you give them 10% of everything, but that's not the way people work. The way to do it, which is it's actually so intuitive, but it's not the way anybody approaches it, is to choose one plate or one ball. So you're spinning 50 plates. Just pick one in its entirety and hand it to them. But entrepreneurs hate that. They hate giving up
Yeah,
control.
right.
So for
It's
you
your
to
baby.
say like, "Hey, I have a podcast. I need you to manage the production of this podcast in its entirely start to finish." Now, I'll walk you through what it is that we're doing and then you can make it better. But I want soup to nuts. I want to show up, hit record and be done. You handle titles, descriptions, edits, booking, scheduling, promotion, blah, 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 blah. That's one whole plate. But that's even saying that out loud, that kind of like that's uncomfortable, you know? You'd rather give
Yeah,
somebody all these little rinky-dink tasks. But the issue with that is I've always thought of entrepreneurship as climbing a muddy hill, pulling a sled. And what most of us are doing is you're climbing this muddy hill and it's raining and you're pulling the sled and you've got, there's leather straps digging into your back because you're the mule, you're the one pulling the sled and if you stop walking because it's a muddy hill, you'll just start dragging backwards, and so you have to keep walking, and then you finally get overwhelmed enough to hire help. And what most people do is they hire somebody to help, and then they say, "Hey, do me a favor, do this little task, and while you're doing it, why don't you hop up on the back of that sled?" And so you hire somebody to do some menial thing that really means nothing in the grand scheme of things, and you just made your sled heavier. The
Yeah.
thing to do is to get a strap and be like, "Hey, buddy, can you
Yeah.
help me pull?" And so don't put somebody on the back of the sled knitting socks. Like, get somebody to get a strap and pull, whatever that might mean. And I think that, in specific terms, it's handing them one of the balls you're juggling or handing them one of the plates that you're spinning in their entirety instead of just, and the way to know the difference is, are you delegating tasks or are you delegating projects? If you're delegating to somebody who can't take anything more than tasks, that's not Pareto talent. Get rid of them. They're
Mhm.
excess. They're a waste in your organization. They're beautiful people. Jesus loves them. They're going to heaven, and they're not worth employing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
talking about the value of a person within the mechanism of a business, not wholesale, but the value of this person within the mechanism of business is, if they can't take projects and not tasks, they're worthless. I need someone who can take projects start to finish and allow me to iterate, be receptive to constructive criticism.
When we first started, when I first started, I started my company working out of my house. I was homeschooling. I was a single mom. I had 5 children.
Oh
I was
wow, you had your hands
homeschooling them.
full.
Yeah, so it was 20-hour days. So getting an assistant was amazing. Um, she was very ADD, so she couldn't work from home. So I made a place for her in my office, in my house. And then as we grew, we got office space and over the years, and then we bought our own office building and
Nice.
started and use that. And actually, now we've gone the other way, and now everybody's remote, and we're selling the office building, and because it's just the way the world is now.
Right.
Um, and so, Todd, can you give us some insights on managing remote teams? Because I think that that's a new phenomena for a lot of people and trying to get a grasp on. I mean, you alluded to it in your earlier comment about as entrepreneurs and business owners, we don't like handing things off because we want it done the way we want it done. And it's our baby. And we have to learn how to let that go and be okay if it's not the way we would have done it. Right? Hire
Yeah, oh,
well,
absolutely.
trust your team, right? And that took a few years for me to get there. But I think a lot of people are now you can hire, you have a broader pool to choose from if you're offering remote work because there's a lot of people who that's what they want now. So can you give us some insights on managing remote teams and giving business owners some comfort level about how that works in practicality?
I think the economic model needs to change a little, and the paradigm needs to change a little. Um, I don't believe in paying by the hour for a bunch of reasons, especially in a post AI world, because it doesn't align incentives. If I'm paying somebody by the hour, their incentive is to spend an hour. So what I like to do is I like to pay, and if I can get our incentives align perfectly, that'd be great. So a real sterile example would be a paid ad agency, and I use that as an example because I've owned one. But I charged clients according to ad spend under management. So if I was managing $10,000 for you, I was charging you 10%.
Right?
I'm managing your 10 grand. I'm pocketing $1,000. So what would make the most sense in terms of alignment is to find the employee who I can pay as a percentage of ad spend, or maybe more appropriately, even a percentage of what I'm billing, because there's always like ancillary things that are being billed in addition to the ad spend. And most agency owners I know didn't like to do that because they'd end up with employees making all this money. And in my mind, I'm like, well, that's the best thing that can happen to you. Because if you're dealing with Pareto talent, the average employee could probably manage about 20 accounts. Pareto could manage 80. Like, there's no limit, and it puts you in a position to where you don't have to worry about outgrowing or outpacing this talent because your incentives are aligned. You even find yourself in a position to where they're the ones bringing on the help so that they can grow their incentive pool. Most people aren't entrepreneurs. 9 out of 10 aren't. So putting somebody in a position where they can be an intrapreneur, I think that's the way to model this. I have a close friend who he has an employee. He has a role that he's been looking to fill for a long time, and a task that he's been looking to get done for a long time. It's a very valuable task to him, in this business model that he has. And I'm trying to veil his identity so he doesn't know I'm talking shit about him if he ever hears my podcast. And he finally found somebody to do the task, and the guy does the task extraordinarily well. And so I just checked in on him like, "Hey, buddy, how's that going?" And he goes, "It's going well. I'm happy with the task, but I don't know if I'm getting a full 8 hours out of this guy." And in my mind, I'm like, "Why do you care?" You know what I mean? Like, you're paying to have this thing done that you couldn't have that you were having the hardest time getting done before. You're actually paying less than you would have paid a vendor. But in his mind, he goes, "I'm paying for the full 8 hours. I wanna sit here like Scrooge watching you,
Yeah,
do whatever it is." So I think that all of us need to understand people are gonna check out and watch Netflix. They need to go to the ballet recital. They need to take a dentist appointment. They need to take a personal call. They're gonna have down days. And if you're dealing with really quality talent, they'll manage around it. So you just need to tell them, "Here's my desired end result. I
yeah,
need you to manage a minimum of 30 clients. And for every additional client you manage, I'll give you whatever percentage of the invoice." And you'll find people that, they're gonna find their stasis. I had a young lady who worked for me who's a clinical psychologist, really, really brilliant gal. She wanted to help kids. She lives in Argentina where the economy's collapsing, so she worked for me to pay the bills. But her nights, mornings, and weekends were spent counseling children. And so as soon as she earned enough to pay her bills, she didn't want more from me. She wanted to go help kids. You'll get employees like that. They're great. And then you'll get employees that are like, I have another young lady who works for one of my entities that is paid on a per client basis. She makes she makes 9 times what a peer in her market would make. 9 times, because she won't stop taking on new clients because she's like, "You're gonna pay me how much?" And a lot of business owners would look at the fact that she's making 9 times what
yeah,
somebody else would make and be like, "Oh, well, that's an untenable risk." And I'm like, "That's the
mhm,
best money I've ever paid." And she does it extraordinarily well. So, I think managing remote teams requires rethinking the value model of what you're actually paying. And then doing a lot to keep people still close. Like we have custom Slack channels with, travel threads and book threads and share pictures of your pet and your kids. And we do a weekly all hands meeting, and we do something called the open mic where one employee every week presents on a topic they're passionate about. So it might be like somebody did a guitar solo and people share about their city, and somebody shows the thing that they're building, or their side hustle or their passion project. I don't think remote needs to mean disconnected. I think people need to feel a part of a community, and then they need to be incentivized in a way that really values their time investment. But I believe firmly in Parkinson's law. Work is going to expand to the time allotted. So if you're paying people by the hour, you're just paying them to be slow. Pay people by the output. And again, in an AI world, they're going to find a way to maximize their output. And you want people that gamify the system that way.
right. Actually, that's what launched me into entrepreneurship was the last job that I had before, I was a business owner. I went in as a sales and marketing director and within a year, increased them by 800%.
Wow. And I bet you they capped your income, didn't they?
I was making more than the owner,
Yeah.
and they didn't like it.
Yeah.
So then they started to try and play with it and, was pushing back, and I'm like, "Why would you be upset? I mean,
Right.
your business has grown by 800%." And I was signing contracts 3 years, like 3-year contracts instead of 1 year. So they had all this contract just wrapped up for years. And so that's when I was like, I can do this for myself."
Yeah. I'm out. Good for
Yeah.
you. Isn't that crazy? Like, how short-sighted can people be?
Right. And, what's funny is 2 years later, she called me and said, "Would I be interested in coming back?"
Ah!
No. I wanna tap into, because 'cause you're an incredible entrepreneur. You've had great success with businesses. How do you decide what business ideas are worth pursuing and which ones to leave on the table?
Oh, man. I have an addiction to starting businesses, and it's a good question, Bethany, because 'cause I'm not good at this at all. There's the saying, "Just because you can doesn't mean that you should."
Well, the fact
And
that
I
we know the saying is a start.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the saying, but I don't take that advice. Like, I have these opportunities that and it's sad after I got money, it's interesting what happened. Somebody told me, my friend Brandon Turner said this. He goes, "It's the craziest thing because when you're poor, nobody wants to give you anything, and then you get rich and everybody wants to give you everything for free." So I'm a welfare baby. I was raised by a blind single mother on Social Security disability.
Mm.
I worked my hindquarters off, and I made a
Power to
eight-figure
the
exit.
single moms.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah, single that's exactly right. But I think the children of single mothers, we tend to be a little tougher, so I bet your kiddos probably have the same story.
They have a good work ethic, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now, people opportunity comes out of the woodwork. Um, and I wish you should see my calendar, it's insane. It's insane. The only thing that keeps me sane is the fact that I can find top talent. So what I do is my thesis is this, is I build a business, find somebody to run it, and then I walk away. It's that walking away part that I've not been great at. Um, so I need a better buy box. What I've promised myself I want $100 million net to me after taxes. That's my goal. And so what I've decided is if an opportunity isn't worth a $1 million on an exit, it doesn't make sense for me to pursue. So if I can't get 10 million net out of the sale of an entity, then even if it's a good idea, I shouldn't play with it because it doesn't make sense in terms of where I want to go and what I want to do. And I know those are really sterile terms. Like people can kind of, you can turn your nose up at the money talk, but that's also why we're doing this. It's like money's how we keep score. And there's a lot of things I know I want to do with that money. And none of it, I don't, I mean, I live in a home that's two tax brackets under where I stand. I drive a 40-year-old Honda. Like I could have a Ferrari for every day of the week and I don't. So money's not about posturing or ego. I want to be in the room, and I feel like the money gets you in the room. And so I think the buy box for businesses should be, not that I do this, but it should be, does this contribute to my long-term goal and does it contribute to my lifestyle? I have two little boys. I'm divorced, so I get them every other week. And when I'm on daddy duty, I just want to be on daddy duty. And I want to be able to check out. And I take them all over the place. We've been to London and Bucharest and Costa Rica, and my son wants to go to Brazil because he's obsessed with soccer. So I want businesses that support that. So I think what people should do is instead of just looking at, is this a good opportunity? That's not the buy box. The buy box is, what do I want out of life? How much money do I want to make? How much time do I want to spend? Who do I want to spend it with? Who do I want to play with? Like, who are the people that I really get jazzed about hanging out with? I've got a friend who, for various reasons, really has a heart for what I'll call expatriated Christian women. And that would be women raised in very conservative Christian settings who have left that setting. Not to say they're no longer Christians, but just to say that they're no longer in that really, strict
Fundamentalist.
fundamentalist. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's like, well, gosh, that's where you should play. I love Montessori schools. I think every child deserves to go to a Montessori school. So I have a business that helps Montessorians. Like, who do you love? Who do you really have a heart for? Who would you work for free? And then go do that, but, find a way to make it valuable. And I think that's the way we should pursue opportunities instead of what I'm doing now, which is just, it's like playing whack-a-mole, but if you hit the mole, you start the business. You know what I mean? Like I can't, I gotta cut that out because it's getting a little
I
excessive.
appreciate your honesty and transparency in it because, we all struggle with those things. Um, I have 3 businesses,
Yeah.
and I just did a DBA up under one of them because it was somewhat aligned, so I was
Isn't it
like, "I
funny
don't
when
wanna
you
start
cheat? You're
another
like,
one, let
"That's
me
not a
throw it
new
in there."
business, that's just a new offer." Yeah, it's so funny. I do that same thing too.
What's the biggest lie you've ever heard told
Oh, man.
in the business space?
Do what you love. I think it's work with who you love, but I think doing what you love is the worst thing that we've ever told children. Um, Nobody wants to pay you to do what you love. If they did, you know what I mean? You wouldn't have to get paid. So I think we need to do what's necessary. Um, and I know that sounds a little jaded, but I also think that's just true.
Hmm. I have a daughter who's like the dreamer. She's always been the dreamer, and her dreams and her reality don't always align.
Mm,
And I think that's a struggle for a lot of small business owners when they, the lie they've been told is you can do anything,
yeah,
um, and you can just follow your passions and it will lead to success. And I would say that's a lie.
yeah. Well, there's only 5 people
It's
on
not that
the
simple.
court in a basketball game, you know what I mean? There's that's it. There's 5 people that start in every basketball game, and so I wanted to be a basketball player, and if you're not one of the 5, you don't play. You can't be in a wheelchair and go to the moon. I remember talking to a
Right,
gentleman who wanted nothing more to be an astronaut, and he was in a wheelchair, and he had this really interesting, I thought, very positive outlook. It was one of pragmatism, but he's like, "I can't go to the moon." And that just is what it is. Is it sad? Yes. Is it unfair? Yes. But do we need to, like, write legislation that allows for ADA compliance on spaceships so the guy in the wheelchair can go to the moon? No, I don't think we do. I think instead we need to raise people that understand, I'm 6'4", I can't be a fighter pilot because you gotta be 6'2". My uncle Dave's a fighter pilot, and they don't want you with, like, if you're colorblind, you can't be, so there's just all these things that are just, it just is what it is. We can't all be a rock star.
right.
If you look at any stadium, there's, I don't know what, enough room for a dozen people on a stage and 50,000 people in the audience. And that's just the math. It's just what it is. And
Yeah,
so this whole world that we're raising people in that says everybody gets to be famous and everybody gets to get the limelight. And I'm like,
everybody gets the trophy.
yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's true. As a matter of fact, I think the opposite is true, statistically speaking. Uh, so yeah, I think we're lying to people. And I also, the flip side of that coin, and this is the thing that's really frustrating, is success is an absolute inevitability given enough time. Success is an absolute inevitability given enough time. The problem is most people don't give it the time. They try, they
Or they
fail the
can't
way,
afford it.
well, and that's another,
Cost to giving it time.
yeah. Yeah, there's I think a values misalignment as far as what people will and will not do. Like, I get really maybe depression era thinking in this way, but for people that are trying to start a business, especially if you don't have kids. If you have kids, it's a whole different scenario and story. But if you don't have children, you should be living in your mom's basement and eating mac and cheese.
Mhm.
And you know what I mean? You should drive a 50-year-old Toyota, and like, just make the sacrifices. You shouldn't have, why do you have Netflix? Why are you, that's, first of all, it's $15 a month. Second of all, what are you doing with your time? Do you actually watch Netflix?
Yeah,
But everybody's got a $1,500 phone in their pocket. We're all sitting here walking around with a supercomputer. Everybody needs the newest everything, and I'm like, man, your money is fuel. You are burning fuel on stuff that doesn't get you any closer to your goal. So, no, I think success is an inevitability, but it's really easy to get caught up in these little traps that distract you and pull you off. It's like, oh well, we need a bigger house and we need the add-on and I need that new truck, and all of a sudden you're like a slave to all this stuff.
yep. The more you have, the more you have to take care of too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
we
sorry for that departure, Bethany. I hope that wasn't too preachy.
No, I love it. I think we're very aligned, you and I. And I really appreciate you being here. Can you share with the audience where they can find you, where they can get the free book, all that good stuff?
Yeah, you can go to kasim.me, Kasim.me. The book is on thehirebook.com, and everything's free. There's no sales pitch on the other end of it. So my hope is that I can help people find really quality talent, preferably in international markets. I have a heart for people in emerging nations, is what we're supposed to call them now, because you can't say third world country anymore. Uh, there's a lot of good that can be done, you know, giving people opportunity that don't necessarily have access to it. So that's
Yeah,
the that's the soapbox.
love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.